Hi, I'm Steve Koepp, the co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values. In today's webinar, we'll be exploring a topic that's familiar to everyone, but with new implications this year, which is about goal setting after an extraordinary year, setting employees up for 2021 success. Every new year presents an opportunity for companies to refresh their focus, set new goals. Today, our expert panelists will share their best practices for setting employees up for success at a time when there's much more than the usual amount of uncertainty about the economy, the pandemic, working conditions, returning to offices, and just where the whole trajectory of our situation will take us. More specifically, the panel will address the lessons learned in the past year and how leaders are resetting expectations for what's to come. They'll address questions like, how will companies bring fresh compassion to the goal-setting process? What new resources and techniques are leaders introducing to ensure employees can perform at their best? Before we dive into this topic, we'd like to thank our partners, Bravely and Achievers. I'll tell you a little about them. Bravely connects your people to on-demand confidential coaching in the moments that define the employee experience. Access to Bravely's network of vetted professional coaches fosters employee well-being and development to supercharge performance and help people thrive at work. When leading organizations offer Bravely to everyone, they scale the support offered by their people teams and transform their cultures in the evolving world of work. Achievers' employee voice and recognition solutions bring your organization's values and strategy to life, activate employee participation, and fuel a culture of performance to experience data-driven business results. Now, a few quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded, will be available on demand soon after the event, so you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM, and the Human Resource Certification Institute, HRCI. And look out for a written account of our conversation soon on our website at fromday1.co. At about 3:00 p.m. Eastern Time, the top of the next hour, we will have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, business journalist Lydia Dishman, who reports and edits for Fast Company on tech and leadership, and has written for CBS Money Watch, Fortune, and the New York Times, among others. Okay, Lydia, over to you.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We are excited to have you on board for this, what I hope is going to be a very informative discussion with lots of great takeaways. So I was thinking about this, and when Blur's Day became part of the common parlance for the way time warped and bent to make all days feel the same over the last year, I started to wonder how it would affect the way that we achieve goals, both large and small. After all, it's kind of hard to keep your eye on the prize when every day feels like Monday or Sunday or Thursday or any other day. So I was heartened to learn that there's this groundbreaking new study that revealed that there's a better way to achieve goals, so that the focus is on the effort and not the reward. So I guess that's science's way of saying slow and steady wins the race, because it's easy to say what you want, like I want to get a promotion or I want to complete a marathon, but it's the steady work towards these goals that makes that happen. So this is especially true during times of chaos and uncertainty, like Steve said. Sometimes the general framework for goal setting that many of you may have heard, the SMART formula, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, kind of a tongue twister, but that doesn't always work for us in these times. So to discuss the evolution of the way we set and measure goals, we've just assembled this stellar group of panelists, which I am going to go around and ask them to introduce themselves briefly, tell about their work, and how their personal view of goal setting has evolved over the past year. So I'm going to ask Pete to kick us off.
Thank you, Lydia. My name is Pete Leckemby, and I'm the head of talent management at Dish Network. And my team oversees leadership and organizational development, as well as all of our talent management activities. And interesting, that question, in relating to the quote you had mentioned, my view of goal setting personally largely hasn't changed this past year, because it has always been about less about the goal destination and more about the growth that happens in the process. An author and friend, Russ Peterson Jr., had said, perfection is a direction, not a destination. And that really stuck with me. And, a couple weeks ago, we just watched the college football championship, and Coach Saban, after Alabama won what seems like every year, but he talked about, just the commitment through all the chaos and all the distractions to the process. And it's that idea of day after day, continual steps. So yeah, that's been my viewpoint for the last few years, and largely that hasn't changed this past year.
That's great. Well, I like the perfection quote. I may be copying that from you. Thank you for that. Sarah, how about you?
Hi, Lydia. Thanks for having me today. So I'm Sarah Sheehan, president and co-founder of Bravely. As Steve just introduced a little bit about us, we offer confidential coaching to employees in the moments where they need it most. And as you can imagine, the past year, there have been quite a few of those moments. And I really see, especially in the last 9 months, like, we're helping to redefine a new employee support model that companies are really having or being forced to design day in and day out. Like every day, it seems like there's a new challenge because of the way that we're working virtually, and goal setting is a part of some of the challenges that we've seen arise with our clients. So our team at Bravely, we're close to 30 employees, but we support companies like Zillow Group, Pinterest, the New York Times, all of whom have thousands of employees. And, we'll talk more about this, how I've seen things change within the companies that we support. I would just say personally, I'm someone that likes to set goals for myself on a yearly basis. And it's been incredibly challenging for me to do this on a personal level this past year. And professionally, I think we have a different expectation for ourselves because there are sometimes other things attached to personal goals versus professional. But I've also found it really challenging professionally to figure out how to meet what's in front of me. And I have a unique set of circumstances. I was a new mom when COVID started. I still don't have childcare. I have an 8-year-old stepdaughter that doesn't love virtual learning. Like, there's lots of different flavors and factors playing into this. But I have a little bit of a different perspective than Pete, that like it's dramatically changed for me because I feel like I don't have a minute in my day to sort of even think about goal setting. And so figuring out like what the structure is and the levels of accountability in my life to help me accomplish what is in front of me professionally, because I can't just let that go to the wayside. Like maybe I can say I'm not going to lose those 10 pounds that I wanted to lose, or I'm not going to like learn a new, I don't really ever set that goal, by the way, but I'm just using that as an example. But those things that personally we can let go, we can't do that professionally. And so I really have to be intentional about what I set up to support myself and my team.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you said that, because I do want to dive a little bit deeper into the kinds of priority shifts that we've all experienced over the years, whether you've changed your whole method or not. Like Pete, I think that definitely everyone's assessed what's important a little bit differently this year because of everything that everybody's been through. But as I said, more to come. So Jay, how about you?
Thank you so much, Lydia, and thank you all for the invitation and the opportunity to join the discussion. So my name is Jaya Brown. I go by Jay, and I am an HR director with Hub International. It's the 5th largest insurance brokerage in the world. Over 13,000 employees and over 450 offices across North America. My team and I run HR operations, what we like to define as people, culture, and engagement, for one of our larger divisions, over 600 employees across 3 states. And what I would say is, it's interesting. I was reflecting on the quote that you gave, Pete, and also thinking about the affirmation that I selected randomly this morning and have in my mirror. I try to do this practice every morning, and it was win the race at your own pace. And I would say that this year, that's what's evolved for me. I've had that mindset of, just the importance of, co-creating and working with your manager or with your employee around, goal setting, but then also just giving giving some grace and also meeting people where they are. And really, I think to the points raised, Sarah, you also mentioned this as well, like thinking about the actions as opposed to like, it has to be this way, like this is the way that you have to achieve this goal. And so just meeting people where they are. And what I found is that there's been more of a focus on that as an organization. And that has also, again, just sort of underscored, I think, the personal thought that I had, or the approach that I had around goal setting too. I've seen other people start to embrace that in different ways as well.
Yeah, we were talking about compassion, but it's also about meeting people where they are. And that certainly, has a lot to do with the way that you're, setting priorities as well, and how that's all shifted. So thank you for that. Kendall, last but not least, over to you.
Yes, thank you. So I work at UST. We're a 26,000 person, still private organization based in Southern California, focused on providing digital platforms and solutions to our clients. I head up executive recruiting here, talent acquisition. I'd have to say that really things certainly have changed over the course of last year. It's an interesting topic. I think that our values have really helped contribute to making it, I would definitely not say a seamless process, but certainly one that I think we've weathered pretty well. We were founded on the values of humanity, humility, and integrity. I think it's had a calming effect on our overall organization and put health first at first. And as we started to settle in, as the days of the pandemic continued to wear, of course, health, immediate physical health is replaced by a focus on mental health and making sure that everybody's all right. But I think beyond that too, there are a couple of other things that we've focused on. Part of that is really focusing on some of the advantages that have come with working virtually. And having many people working virtually, you lose that commute, you're able to work a little bit more flexible hours. And beyond that too, I think there's also been a heightened focus on now, because we don't really know what tomorrow's going to look like, and we can only guess. But focusing on today and maybe the next day, or what's going to happen this week, has really been tantamount, I think, to helping provide a better sense of mental health and purpose.
Well, I'm glad you talked about focus there, because that's kind of where I want to go with this next question. We're talking about, how things have evolved, and without figuring out what your priorities are, it's hard to set goals. So how have you seen priorities shift over this last year? And how has that played into goal setting of any kind? Just the day-to-day stuff that you have to get done, or the longer term, quarterly, half yearly, and so on. Pete, what do you say?
Yeah, it's interesting. Priorities did shift quite significantly for us last year. Obviously going out of what your long-term 2020 plans were to, okay, business continuity is an important first step. When you send 15,000 employees home, your IT team is stressed, and going through all of that was step one. Coincidentally, within a few weeks period of doing that, we had introduced like the Google suite of productivity products. So, there was a lot of change management going on around that. So it did shift our priorities quite significantly, and it became almost a triage approach as opposed to a very long-ranging approach. And then as we were able to get, we were deemed as an essential business, and we were able to bring some folks that were, felt safe and comfortable to do so on site. There was an enormous amount of work that had to go into that process just from a health and safety standpoint. So that became a big part of our HR objectives, was the environment and creating a healthy and safe workspace for folks. And then also for our managers, a lot of them were managing remote teams for the first time in their lives. And, day and a half long leadership workshops are no longer relevant. And it has to be very short, brief topics really relevant to managing that remote team and engaging those folks so that they can keep in touch with their people when they're no longer in the same room. So yeah, it dramatically shifted our priorities and forced us to really rethink what's important, and help our team and our team members that we're going through this. And becoming teachers at the same time as they were becoming, stay-home workers for the first time. Parents had an interesting challenge to navigate as well. So it was a really tough time, and really proud of our team members. The employees did a great job of continuing to stay focused on the mission and what the goals were, while pivoting and learning an entire new way of working. It was really an interesting and somewhat inspiring challenge that we went through as a team.
It was like, you never signed up for sort of the outward bound at a corporate level, but that's kind of what it became. I mean, it's like, it's the exercises like you do on those corporate retreats where, you have the trust exercises and things like that, and just, in a completely upending and confusing time. And, I'm reminded of, Sarah, you mentioned that you're a new mom. And I mean, it's been a lot of years since I was a new mom, but I remember the word essential coming up so often in the beginning of my daughter's lives. It was like, only what's essential. Don't try to think too far ahead. It's just like, the next feeding, the next diaper, and the entire world just kind of collapses around you, and you just focus on these essential things. So, I don't necessarily want you to, drag your, newborn experiences into this, but what priorities have shifted for you?
I'm always happy to talk about my ugly truth. So I've talked about this a lot, actually, that I was 4 days back from maternity leave when we decided to send our team home, and then had to figure out how to support all of our clients. So we have tens of thousands, like almost 50,000 employees that we're supporting, right? And everyone's businesses were shifting. And I personally was trying to navigate, like I said, I was a first-time mom, didn't have childcare now because of COVID, and was running a business. Thankfully, I have an amazing co-founder. But I think I believe so strongly that this year has been a huge opportunity for business leaders to start understanding why it's important to no longer separate what happens in our personal and professional lives. Our personal lives have always been impacting how we show up at work. And in particular for women, I think it's something that we've just done really well over the past decades and centuries before. But now, there's a light that's been shown that says, okay, everything's actually a lot messier. And now we can see into each other's lives over Zoom every day. And so I think, for me personally, realizing that I may not be able to accomplish as much as I used to was a really hard pill for me to swallow. And it took me months and months and months of beating myself up and trying to accomplish what I had been able to accomplish in the past. And just finally, Jay, you used the word grace before, like giving myself the grace. It opened up a whole new window into, how I support my own team and how we support the tens of thousands of people that we do through Bravely. And, all of this, I think, is just going to lead us into a deeper conversation around like how this translates to very tactical things inside the organization. But you have to start with that foundation of how are things different now? And from my perspective, I very much believe that I have to understand on a very deep level what each person individually is going through before I can determine what their goals should be, or even what the goals of, as we think at a high level, what the goals of the organization are. And then we, drill that down into individual goals. If you're not willing to go deep and first of all, share your own story and be vulnerable about the challenges that you're facing, you're not going to get your team to open up those doors so that you can problem solve and figure out how to make them successful and productive over the course of the next quarter or year.
Jay, looking at it through the lens of grace and space, how did your priorities shift this year?
Yeah, so I would say very, very similarly to what Sarah and Pete shared, all of the bigger buckets and huge priorities. I mean, we had such an opportunity for more sophisticated IT systems and productivity measures and all of that. So that definitely was a priority. Interestingly, one of the things that continued to come up in our executive management conversations was engagement and how we, Sarah, to your point, like individually engage with talent, not just how we, bring them all together in a group fashion. We did need to do that more, and especially, like I said, just across 3 states. In the past, before it would be, driving to those different offices and spending time, but you didn't do that all the time, right? You obviously couldn't be in the car all the time going across 3 states. And so from a larger perspective, the engagement was virtual town halls, and that became a priority. Like every 6 weeks or so, our president and our executive management team getting in front of all of our employees and talking about the changes that were happening, providing support. Our president is a very authentic servant leader, and so talking about experiences, particularly as it related to social unrest and also personal experiences with the pandemic that he and his family personally experienced too, and just being human in front of all of the employees. I think just leading from the top with heart really just set this tone and really more so reflected the culture that we talk a lot about. And then on the individual level, it was, encouraging accountability partners. Like how can you support, a colleague, and what are the 1 or 2 things that you want to focus on this year that you're recognizing? Maybe it's Excel, experience, which will help, support your productivity in, tracking this or completing this, who on your team, or even not on your team, but even in another market, is really talented in that. How can we connect the 2 of you all and you become accountability partners? And then finally, I would say this is actually something that we're in the process of rolling out for my division is we're calling this coalition Operation Resilience and Engagement. So it's a Midwest West Operation Resilience and Engagement, or the acronym of MORE. And again, just thinking about the conversations that we were having with across our leadership team, how do we build that muscle of resilience? And how do we create or give access to tips and resources and people, based on what individually is needed? And how do we think about that, not just, from quarter to quarter, or from week to week, but from day to day? Today, I might be feeling great, but 2 hours from now, I might be having a rough patch. Like my daughter might be running in, to get help with the remote learning, but I'm on a panel, so, or it could be I'm having, a great day and I want to share some of, these best practices or things that have worked for me. How do we create a space for people to share those on a more regular basis, again, and apply them individually to help, support their needs? And so I think that priority around like support and building resilience and bridging connections was elevated, just over the course of this past year, and is obviously continuing as well.
My trick was always, if you're, unless you're bleeding or having a heart attack, please do not come in if the door is closed.
We've been using that too.
Priorities, differences in emergency level calling on you. Anyway.
Try telling that to a 14-month-old, Lydia.
Yeah, I know. I've been through the whole spectrum. This is when it's good to have, a partner in crime helping with the carrying and all that. So, okay, Kendall, similar question. Tell me how priorities have changed, but also, to Jay's point, how you communicate that throughout the organization.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good example I might just cite, and that is we brought in our new CFO, Diana Rosella, in February of 2020, and that's a heck of a time to have joined now, knowing what was coming. She's new to the organization, obviously in a power position, and people are curious, suddenly the pandemic hits and really Diana's new presence and everything, we were excited to have her on board, but I think still that curiosity extended for some time. But what she did was really interesting. She actually started to have some fireside meetings on once a month. Once we got into the pandemic a little bit, showing her working at home and actually having her husband and kids there in the room with her, and talking about how they'd made the decision as a family to have her husband watch the kids and how their relationship with their dad has changed and all these other things. It's very human. And I think it helped, just from the same example as what Sarah and Jay had both provided, where you open yourself up as a human so that you have your own challenges and how you're handling them. It helps drive that compassion through the organization in a certain sense, and looking at everybody as individuals and understanding that there's no perfect goal setting process or for every person. You have to look at everybody a little bit individually. I think more from an organizational perspective, as the pandemic started to really sink in, there's a great sense of collaboration that it became a very big deal here, where it really broke down barriers in many ways. Suddenly, my team is jumping in and we're working on tech roles. We're doing anything we can for the clients that are. And some clients suddenly are buying like they never have. They have a lot of work. Other clients that maybe are in travel and transportation start to get shuttered or get much, much less urgent. So everybody's moving and shifting quickly to collaborate and address the strike where where things are hottest and find value and show value. So that's been an interesting switch, I think. The final thing I might add is really a focus on learning and development and making sure that you're building skills that, and that can really start with working virtually. What are the best practices? It doesn't have to be something too crazy or out there, but really learning things that'll help you adapt and work better from home and be more effective. And again, I think that those have been the major things that we focused on as an organization.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about learning and development a little bit more later in this broadcast. But I am still thinking about communication and communicating goals and changing goals. Any tools or strategies that you're using that are completely new? I mean, obviously there are, weekly fireside chats that people are employing, but is anyone using anything different? Kendall, do you want to add something there?
Yeah, I can jump in. Actually, we have a tool that we developed in-house that's unlike anything I'd seen, but I love it. It's designed it gives employees the power to set their own goals and collaborate with hiring managers or whoever they're working with. It's a if I were to have a conversation with one of my reports, then and I might say, hey, I'd like to have you spearhead driving more hiring by our organization of Native Americans. It's a very scant few in our organization. That's gonna be a special project for you. We'd like to have you formulate a plan in a month, and then we'll start to work on executing. They've got the app. Now that you have this app that we developed in-house, you just put it in, add me as a collaborator, you put in the time, it's all done in real time. And it sure does make those quarterly check-ins easier when you don't have to go and, okay, what did we talk about 3 months ago? And usually that method tends to focus on what happened the last 2 weeks versus all the other hard work that happened over the course. So it's really nice that the app then just dumps all those accomplishments and things that went well, things that maybe didn't hit the mark, and then we can talk about it. I just found that it's really an excellent tool. Again, just a simple app that allows you to record those, and there's a star and reward system and some other things that are built into it that are pretty excellent. But yeah, they just built this one in-house, which is also kind of cool.
And probably amazingly quickly too, just like Pete, where you were saying everybody had to turn on a dime and so So yeah, Pete, what else did they kind of put in place to keep track of goals and communicating those changes?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, at the end of 2018, we started rolling out with objectives and key results, the OKR framework, from a more corporate strategic level to kind of set goals. And then in 2020, one of our changes was for employees to set their goals, not dramatically differently. We still set them in our success factors system for goal keeping, but we had everybody assign a weighting to that. So out of your 100% of your, impact this year, what percent are each of your goals going to be? And where that really helped out was once the pandemic hit and things shifted dramatically, was being able to put things on hold and make those adjustments and say, hey, I know I said this was going to be 30% of my work. I can no longer do that because of the change. Being able to put that on pause and reset those goals. So that was one thing. And then I mentioned going to the Google Suite. Our executive leadership team this past year, every December, usually do an in-person conference where they get all the executives together and talk strategy and planning for the next year. Obviously couldn't do that this past year. We leveraged Google Classroom and used that platform to distribute pre-recorded videos and do some Q&A, create some social interactions amongst the executives, because they're spread out all over the country and actually across the world now. So it was a great tool for helping create some of that collaboration, and the extra benefit that your kids can no longer pull one over on you because Google Classroom as well, and so you can find out if they've turned in their work or not. So.
Lydia, one of the interesting things that we've seen emerge with coaching is the accountability that it creates. So a lot of our clients are, just this week, I was helping devise a goal setting communication around exactly what you were referring to earlier, SMART goals. So one of our clients is using that framework to set goals with their employees. They have thousands of employees. Obviously, managers are responsible for driving the productivity of their team, but it's often, there needs to be another layer of accountability that's added there. Now, coaching is one way to do it. You could also create, a more of like a buddy system or a mentorship program inside your organization. But we've done this at Bravely with our own team, and obviously are seeing it with our clients, where we're using coaching as a way for people to own their own performance. One thing that has struck me, and I think it tells an incredible story around the last year, that even though we've seen a 700% spike in coaching sessions around stress and burnout, we have not seen a decline in people coming to us to talk about their career development or how to get to the next level. In fact, in those same conversations about stress and burnout, it's very much connected to, I don't want this to impact, obviously, my tenure at the company or my growth. And so these conversations, they're related, right? People experiencing the impact of this last year and how to still stay focused, they need new resources. They need this new employee support model that I keep talking about, because it's real. We're all working remotely. HR teams have been tasked with solving all of the world's problems. And they want to be able to get into every nook and cranny and support every employee on an individual level, but it's not humanly possible. And so you have to be really strategic about what are the tools that I'm going to deploy that allow me as an HR executive or an HR team to really extend my reach and, be a force multiplier in terms of like that productivity for employees and helping them stay accountable because they want to. Just going back to my own personal story, it's like having to understand what I was capable of accomplishing with all of these new constraints around me. It was really important for me to have someone that I could go to stay accountable, to make sure that I was continuing to tweak things as, life there were ups and downs and it's continuing. Unfortunately, we keep talking about the light at the end of the tunnel, and this is going to be how we exist for a while, unfortunately. And companies have to figure out how to catch up on the technology side for sure, like supporting their teams remotely. And then also like, what is it that they're going to get in terms of emotional support? And then also like this accountability to keep driving towards their goals.
Right. Jay, I'm coming to you next, but first I want to take a brief pause for invite Steve back on for a word from our sponsor. Maybe some technical difficulty. Perry, Steve? Well, given how, we do have some weather situation in New York, so internet may be a little sketchy right now. I know that our internet lines do not like the snow, so that's happening, and we will just roll with it. Anyway, Jay, you were talking about accountability partners, and so I want you to just detail a little bit more about how that, how you're communicating that, and how that helps with goal setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I was just going to mention too, we also subscribe to the SMART goals framework as well. And so we've been doing a lot more sort of education and reminders around developing SMART goals. We started this in the summer too, just felt like we needed a refresh on that, and offered some sessions and also just some resources to help people get into that mindset. And speaking of mindset, we also did a lot of training around growth mindset. And so that's also something that we've been talking to our employees about too. And out of that came the conversations around having accountability partners again. So communicating, if these are the goals, let's just say, this was part of a breakout session that we had during one of the workshops. Okay, so I have, 2 or 3 goals that I want to work on, and I want to get some, job shadow experience or even real-time experience. If I'm working on something, who can I reach out to? Who can I phone? When can I phone a friend? Who would be on the other end of that to really help me build up some expertise in this particular area, or, learn some of the shortcuts around Excel or whatever that is. And so what we've done on just a local level is just encourage that outreach again across the team, and also having what we call calibration sessions. So we've actually done this both within our HR team meetings, but also during our HR summit, we had these modeled as well. And essentially, it just leaves space on the agenda for people to talk about something that they're working on, be it a skill that they're trying to develop and or a situation that they're trying to navigate through. Performance management, employee relations, might be, identifying talent, for a role that they're trying to fill, talking about what they've done up until this point, and then also where they might need some additional support or requesting recommendations. And that's been helping to sort of build that accountability almost informally or organically across the teams. I heard you talking about this. I actually have, I've done this, or I've worked with this partner, or I developed this template. And so a lot of it has been more organic, but sort of creating that space or those forums for people to talk about those different experiences or processes, programs and such that they're navigating through, and then opening themselves up to other people helping them to work through those. So that would be one of the things. Then I was just going to mention too, career progression. Sarah, you were talking about this. Like, career progression is actually an area of opportunity for us, and some work that my team is doing right now with some of our practice leaders. And so it's, we're in the sort of the first stage with some of the practice areas where it's actually building out a career progression framework. Like, if an employee comes to work for us, do they know what's expected of them in the role? And then what support that they will have as they move through that particular position, but then also being able to look ahead and see what skills would be required, as they prepare to move up the ladder, or even across the ladder as well. It can be lateral moves too. So we're doing some of that work as well, which is then allowing us to have conversations with a larger group around this career progression, and then giving them access to different tools, resources, workshops that they can take advantage of to also help them achieve whatever goals they're setting for themselves in, that first or second year within that role. So those are some of the other things we're doing.
Interesting. Well, I've just been told by one of our attendees that there is a Verizon issue that started in Brooklyn, which is where Steve is based. So that's why he's not with us currently. So just in lieu of that, I will say once again that our sponsors are Achievers and Bravely. Thank you for supporting our panel. And to attendees, please drop your questions if you have any for the panelists in the Q&A box, and we will get to those at the top of the hour. I hope I did Steve justice. So moving on, I'm glad you mentioned the bit about skills, because I keep hearing through the course of my reporting, certainly in the surveys that are coming across my desk, that, you know, this there's always been a skills gap, but the pandemic has just showed us more of how wide it is in certain areas. And certainly learning and development plays into professional development, setting those goals. What skills do I need, as you said, Jay? So I want to talk about training and development in this new environment, and how you determine who needs it. When you're looking at a full suite of goals for your departments or the entire organization, how are you determining who is going to get that professional development? Kendall, why don't we start with you? He's got his head down. So.
Well, yeah, as far as the learning and development approach here, the determination of who might receive it is pretty simple. Again, we're very flat organization in so many ways, and the answer is that everybody is going to participate and receive that professional training. We don't do an incredible amount of live training, at least to my knowledge, but we do have our internal training mechanisms. We utilize LinkedIn Learning and a variety of other tools that work very well. There's a library of I guess, trainings, and we've got a practice that's focused on doing that. That's very proactive. So I can only speak from my personal experience, which has been that the learning and development teams reached out to me and given me, basically carte blanche, saying, "Hey, what do you want your team to learn this quarter?" And I've made recommendations, and folks have marched through that. We do have weekly touch points in which we discuss as a group, how does this apply to us? What does work here? What doesn't work there? Our work here at USD in our environment, and that's been really productive as well. But it's been very inclusive.
Interesting. Pete, what does it look like at Dish?
Yeah, so we have 6 different training teams dispersed out for all of our different business units. So that serve our, our call centers, our technicians in the homes, our manufacturing and distribution, our sales organization, as well as our wireless team. And then my team sits kind of centrally, and we have what's called a Learning Center of Excellence. And it's really a coalition that we built to where we can come together regularly and collaborate, whether it's on professional development internally across all the L&D professionals, or on identifying what are those needs for professional development across the business. And it's been a great opportunity to identify who needs prioritization. So we sent all of our call center agents home, and they haven't returned to any sites, and that's the long-term future probably. So there was a lot of professional development on personal productivity and managing that chaotic work environment. Our sales organization similarly, but our technicians, a lot of that professional development was, how do you deliver great customer service and still manage those service levels when you are going into customers' homes? And how do you create that perception of safety and that feeling of safety for customers who may have a TV outage and yet also need to feel safe and secure, and that their health is prioritized. So, I mean, there was a variety of interesting needs. And then obviously for our knowledge workforce as well. You mentioned skills, Lydia, and that's such an interesting thing. And it's hard to measure sometimes, looking at, we use LinkedIn Learning for a lot of our professional development, and looking at the skills insights there. This last year, they were all soft skills, and a lot of them were around personal well-being and wellness and emotional health, emotional intelligence. And then team leadership was another really big priority that jumped up, because our managers care. They want to deliver great experience to the employees and be able to keep that business continuity. But it's challenging. It's scary. They're having to learn this new environment themselves, and then kind of create that reassurance for their team. So we kind of centralized some of it as well, and we launched a weekly cadence. We call it Best Team Tuesday because that connects to one of our strategic pillars for our people side of the business. And it was a weekly email that just linked to a page where it was some simple resources, whether how to conduct team stand-up, how to give feedback over virtual technology, even as simple as how to just use the Google Chat to create a team chat. I mean, we were dealing with a lot of new stuff, and being able to come together as 6 training teams and be a really unified body was really awesome. So it took a lot of professionals, kind of putting aside their own agendas and their egos to serve the greater good, which is really good. It made the challenge bearable.
Communicating virtually is hard. Even for people who are used to doing it, I mean, even just on a chat, it's just so difficult sometimes to get your sentiments across just with the words, emojis notwithstanding. So I think we've all been on a learning curve this year.
Memes and emojis.
And gifts, always a well-placed GIF. But Sarah, I'm wondering if you can tell us about any trends. Are the soft skills really trending in the coaching that you're doing for the clients?
Absolutely. I am one of those people that hates virtual life. I always joke that I'm in my 40s and working out loud. I don't know if it's because I'm in my 40s. Actually, I shouldn't say that because there's probably people that are really good at it who are also in their 40s or older. But everyone on my team is just so used to, they grew up with like instant messenger. I mean, I didn't have email until college. And so the idea of working out loud for me is just incredibly challenging. And so there are so many, this is just one simple example of how a member of your team could be struggling and you don't know it, because like saying out loud what I just said doesn't feel like a comfortable thing to announce to your team or, different parts of your organization that you have a really hard time, communicating virtually. But what we're seeing is like that's showing up inside our sessions, right? So people they want career development. They're also being faced with new challenges around relationships and communication. And when we think about learning and development, there's Steve, so much of what we learn in trainings, I could probably just Google right now, like how long do we retain the information from a training? And it's not very long. And so one of the things that I think is super powerful about creating accountability or coaching is, and of course, I'm always going to be biased because I really believe in coaching because my company is a coaching business. But what I've seen, and we have thousands of testimonials to back this up, is that when you have accountability and you can go back and continue to work on something in a safe space where action is really the point. Like in our sessions, we're really trying to drive people to action. So if you're coming because you've identified like a goal for me is to improve my relationship with my manager or learn to communicate more effectively, you're leaving these sessions and then you're going and you're exercising that muscle. And very often when we're being trained on things, like we're captivated in the moment, but we don't always have the opportunity, right? But if it's a bottoms up approach where it's, Sarah, know I want to work on these 3 things, and I'm working with a coach to say like, this is how this is going to translate into my weekly life at work. And then I'm going to come back and talk about how I applied it, what worked, what didn't, what I could continue to focus on. Like that's where real behavior change starts to happen. And again, any way that I personally, all of my clients work in HR, and I feel like every day I'm trying to create new ways and opportunities for us to extend their reach and support them, because in a virtual environment, it's very difficult for, certain personalities to raise their hand and say, I need help, or if they don't feel safe to do it for whatever the reason. Introverts, extroverts, everyone's joking about how introverts are so happy and extroverts are miserable. But these are realities. Like some people are not as willing to talk about the challenges that they're facing. And so, providing support where they can work on the things that they know will help them in an already challenging environment, I believe is just going to be the new normal and an absolute must for companies going forward.
One of the things that I keep coming across also is this notion of productivity and how that's shifted. And certainly we can't measure productivity in quite the same way that we used to. And was there a false sense of productivity when we were able to go sit in a workspace between 9 and 5? Surely you must be productive if you're sitting in that desk chair for 8 hours a day. Well, I'm here to tell you, given as much coverage of productivity and all the hacks that there are to have, most humans are only really in the zone being highly productive 3 to 4 hours a day. And so, and that's not news. That's common, and it's, science-backed research. But of course, we're not in the zone all day long anyway. We're doing other things like email and communicating with our colleagues and so forth. So my question to you all is, in this time of great change, are you looking at productivity as a goal in a very different way? And if so, how are you measuring it? Jay, how about you?
Yeah, I was kind of chuckling when you were saying that. I remember having early conversations pre-pandemic when I first joined, and just open conversations around productivity and hours and, working on this, that, and the other. And oh, how that has shifted, now that we're in this virtual space where, we're finding that people are being uber productive within a very, very short amount of time, as opposed to what, to your point, we thought would be needed in order for them to be productive and hit these different goals. Also, we found that you can do these roles virtually. You actually don't have to sit in this one place, as opposed to this other place. So a lot of ahas and I would say myth busters related to that. Excuse me. And so when I think about, how we're starting to think about productivity, it is sort of shifting that mindset and throwing those notions out the window. It's easier for some than others, but, really trying to coach through what is the goal that you were looking to achieve, or what is the outcome? Like what was the revenue target that we were looking for this producer to hit? And if they are able to do that in a shorter amount of time, is that a negative or is that actually really a positive? And then can we move them on to other activities or, other areas of their job that they can focus on? And can we also leverage them to teach other people how they're being productive? Like, can we leverage this opportunity for them to either be an accountability partner to somebody, or have some visibility and build some experience around presenting, and talk about what's worked for them, and help other people with, their tactics or their strategy around cold calling, or, getting in the door and selling our company, and other business development aspects of their role, just as an example. So we've really been, focusing again on, with individual conversations, this is the outcome that we're looking to achieve. How can we together think about how you can do that? What support do you need? Personally, do you need, in order to achieve that objective? Do we need to think differently about it? So how do we make sure that we're driving towards whatever that outcome? Let's have regular check-ins. That's also something that's a bit newer too. Like, it doesn't have to be super formal, but just check in regularly. There's something really powerful about just a one-on-one connection with somebody, checking in to see how they're doing. And then also checking in to see like what support they need from a manager perspective, but then also coaching with employees, building that brave or courageous muscle around asking for what you need, and in these one-on-one sort of settings. And so my team will have conversations with employees just around how to go into that conversation with the manager. We have those as much as we have the conversations with managers about, approaching it with their employees too. So it's the action individual actions that we have been really coaching around focusing on, as opposed to it has to be, it has to be within this particular time frame, within these hours, et cetera. So.
Kendall, have you changed the way you measure productivity and even flexibility?
Yeah, flexibility is a good one. I think that the mechanism and the way that we measure productivity has stayed, just generally speaking, much the same within my practice, as the goals remain the same. We're really looking to hire extraordinary talent and attract them to our organization. So the basics are still there. I think it's kind of interesting, you're talking about how the product, 3 to 4 hours of productivity during the day, which is the thing that's missing now, though, are some of those unproductive yet relationship building times that can happen by the water cooler or around coffee, et cetera. So we have our team meetings where normally one might break and go have those conversations. So we've added for those that can hang on, we're going to have our coffee. We're going to have, and we're not going to talk about what we just talked about, or we will, but this is basically our water cooler time to continue to develop those relationships and develop some of that. And that kind of comes to the other part I think that's changed, is there's a little bit more of a collaborative sense that we built, or community that we built around goal setting, in which the team is holding each other more accountable and helping troubleshoot obstacles as a group much more than I think we did before. So again, I'd say it's a real positive, but that's become really a regular iteration, is what are your challenges? What are your great successes, and working on celebrating those, maybe a little extra than we did before, even because we're all sitting alone in our offices. And then also setting some goals for the next week publicly. And it's been interesting. I think it has been helpful and motivational, because you don't want to show up and go, well, and I'm always the first to say, I had great dreams last Monday, but it didn't happen, and here's why. But that's a big change. As far as the flexibility, that's, like I said, that's something. I could just give a real quick example. I do have a teammate that is from Croatia. Or from Estonia. She's amazing. She's now in Southern California, but has a aging parent, as many folks do, and had to first go from California to, I think she had to go to Paris, quarantine, before she could go see her dad. So she had like 2 weeks of pure quarantine where she knows nobody, can't really go anywhere. So she was extremely productive, just on different hours. So I was like, okay, well, I'll catch you at the end of the day, and go ahead and you figure out how to be productive during that time, because there really isn't any difference. She's able to be just as productive working virtually, helping make some tough decisions with her family there, and come back in a way that didn't really chop into didn't really cut into her vacation time that continued to accrue, because she was able to really work quite effectively in that environment. So just one example, there's lots of examples of folks that have stuff going on with school and kids and all the other things now that suddenly are on parents' shoulders that they didn't have before, that really forces flexibility. It's one of the things we can do. So the attitude is, why not do it?
I think a lot of organizations have learned to function with, especially in a remote environment, with asynchronous communication. It wasn't always our ideal, because, people would fly in for meetings and sit around a table and, sit there for many hours. But now you can do these things virtually and asynchronously. And, I think we've had to learn some grace and patience with that as well. We are getting a bunch of good questions from our audience. So we're just about at the top of the hour. So I am going to invite Steve back on. I think he's there.
Yes. Hi. I am back. I just want to thank everybody who's participating in improving communication and engagement in a remote workforce. And Oh, wait, that, no, we're goal setting today. Sorry, I flipped back to a different page. Now I'm really back. Okay, our sponsors are Bravely and Achievers. And as a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time. We're going to turn to questions now, and over to you, Lydia.
We actually are improving communications. We are definitely discussing improving communications as well as goal setting. So it's kind of like yeah, this is bonus material, audience. Thank you so much for being with us. Here's a great one. In helping employees set goals for personal growth and skill building, how do you balance their aspirations with company needs? That's a really good question, and I'm going to pose it to all of you. So put your thinking caps on. And Pete, you look like the most ready of the bunch, so I'm going to come to you first.
Well, I had you fooled there. You know, that's an interesting one. And one thing that we've done as a company, so we have within SuccessFactors is our system for this. We have the goals, which again are very focused on the business and should be connected to those company objectives in the OKR framework. But then we also have a separate module for development plans, and that is really for your individual development in service of not just the role you have today, but the role you want to have. And so we treat them as parallel yet separate processes. So you know, a great, for instance, is while I'm focused on my goals for my team and helping drive that, I'm also concerned about their development in where do you want to go in your career. So what skills do you need from a development standpoint? Maybe it's collaboration. Maybe it's, you know, I manage a team of instructional designers, and one of the great advantages of 2020 was there were a lot of free conferences, so we were able to send folks to get some free development. And this is kind of that scary part as a manager, is you have to trust, you have to extend that trust and go, look, block off those 2 days and go to Adobe Max and learn. But you can't just leave it to chance that something might stick. So, you know, one of the things we do with that is prepare a teach back and then teach the rest of the team. So not only are you getting the development, but it's going to stick because you're going to develop the rest of the team. So that's something we advocate. And then broader across the business, we really advocate that not only do you set these development plans, but then you have regular quarterly development touch bases. So it's not always just about the business objectives. Our company, our executives do a really good job of communicating the business strategy and the goals. But if we forget about the people who are delivering those goals, we're not going to be developing for the future. And that's what we need to do. And, you know, we talk skills, we got to be building for the business we want to have down the road, not just the business we have today. So that's one of the ways we're doing it internally.
Yeah.
I think that's a really hot tip with the teach back program. This way, you know, it always helps to kind of talk it out to someone. I mean, that's what study groups are for. You know, when you're cramming for an exam 5 minutes before. Sarah, you wanted to add something?
I love that idea. I think Pete's just touching on also, like, if you think about, you know, someone's personal goals, I mean, they're related to their professional life. We're talking about our lives at work, right? If you're thinking about the OKRs of the company or the KPIs that team's being measured against, and then the personal goals that person has for themselves to develop in the future, you know, starting with the individual and really understanding where they want to go as their manager, or even like as you're creating processes as an HR leader, like that's the first step in getting them to be more productive so that the company can hit all of their OKRs and KPIs. And so, you know, I often, you know, our approach through coaching is getting down to, you know, deep with the employee to understand what their goals and needs are, because you can't expect someone to be, especially now, you know, leaping out of bed every day to be productive if you don't have an understanding of the direction that they want to head. So my recommendation is always to make sure that whatever process you have, that it really does develop a deep understanding. And, you know, there's questions around like, what do you do if someone can't get to the next level in their career right now because of some of the challenges that the company is facing? I still think you can help them develop in other areas and feel as though, you know, they are moving in the right direction, even if they're not getting the promotion that they want. But you can't you can't get there unless you're willing to have these conversations and have a deep understanding of, you know, the desires of that employee. And then that's going to make them more productive in the future.
Jay, do you want to add something about balancing personal goals with the whole professional objective?
Yeah, I would say Sarah and Pete summed it up, very well. I agree with all the points that were raised. One of the things that we've done to help with that balancing as well in our division, we just rolled out what we call HR Talks. It's our version of learning and development to meet the local needs of our employees. And we have the benefit of leveraging resources and training that's put out from our corporate HR division. But then this also allowed us to do a pulse survey with our employees, as well as connect with managers too, to talk about, what are some of the things that are coming up in your career conversations or your development conversations with your employees that HR could partner with you to help address. And then also from employees, what are some of those, areas that you need support on? And we get everything from some of the soft skills we've talked about, technical skills, but we also get, thoughts or feedback around, just personally being able to support them too. And so in response to some of the personal feedback that we received, back to Kendall's point around flexibility, we actually expanded what used to be a perk that happened in the summer. We called it summer hours. We actually expanded that in 2021 to Friday hours, which means from the beginning of the year all the way to the end of the year on Fridays, employees have the opportunity to log off early, assuming that they, depending on what their role is, as long as they have a backup or they alternate with members of their team. But the intention is to be able to use that time for whatever it is, be it, attending a workshop or just unplugging from all technologies and spending time with family and friends, being able to just navigate through some of the other personal priorities that they might have. That was just sort of one sort of reaction or one response to some feedback that came up from employees as they were trying to balance, again, these personal and professional goals that they have for this year.
Kendall, did you want to add something to that?
Well, I don't have a lot to add. There's some outstanding input, but I might just add that one of the things that's a little bit easier is getting a new hire that you've already talked to and have a great understanding of why they want to join and where they want to go. And you've talked about their career and what the career mapping might look like. But one of the things that we really do try to do, and it's important because there's so many people that have worked here for 8, 10, 12 years, et cetera, is realizing that people do change. And somebody that was a real technologist and obsessed with technology at one point, hey, they're not necessarily going to stay there. They may want to start to move into sales or business development as they change. And I think that's just really a key aspect, is to not assume that as you work with an employee that they are that same person, and to continue to push them to figure out where any new needs may be coming up, and allow them to explore some opportunity in places that maybe they hadn't had opportunity before, to see if that is an area that they want to do. I know I had one employee that felt like they really wanted to get into a different part of the business, but after attending a conference there, did not want to get into that part of the business. That was not definitely a quick lesson, but you never know. If you don't know what it's like over there, then you might dream that it's perfect. So anyway, that's all I'd say about that. Jaya, Sarah, and Pete definitely covered.
Well, and I think that if you are, what I'm hearing all of you basically saying is, overall, if your employee is meeting their personal and professional goals, that is going to contribute to the success of the company overall, regardless, because that's an engaged employee that is looking to build something for themselves, and therefore, by design, also for the company. Sarah, you touched on a little bit of the answer to this question. What do you tell staff who are on the cusp of promotions but may not be able to achieve their developmental goals in the next year to get that promotion? I think it would be helpful to talk about just really concrete strategies. What do you tell those staff, especially if you can't move them up the chain that quickly? Do you want to expand on that a little bit, Sarah?
Yeah, I think, again, I keep going back to the opportunities that 2020 has presented us. And I think for leaders, there is now the space or the platform for you to be a lot more transparent and vulnerable. So being upfront about the realities, I think it goes a lot further than one might have thought a year or two ago. I think we've moved on from this workplace where a lot of things are shrouded in secrecy, or and when I say secrecy, I don't mean that in like such a dark as it sounds, but you know, I've led teams now for years, and in larger organizations, there was always some element of me keeping things from people. And I don't lead that way any longer. I try and be really upfront and transparent with my team. I understand that that's probably not, like, everyone's not capable of doing that, but I think there is some measure of this that you can start instituting or implementing within your own life as a leader, where, you know, you're just being really upfront with people and letting them know the reality. And that earns trust. But saying to them, you know, I'm not going to be able to meet X, Y, and Z needs right now, but let's talk about what we can do together, right? That buy-in of, you know, goal setting, you know, thinking about someone's development, including them in that conversation when people feel like they really have a voice in the decision-making process. And then you can set up that frequent touch base, as Jay's referring to, and that accountability, so that, you know, despite you not being able to meet the ultimate needs, like, you're still letting people know that you care and that you want to do whatever you can, even if you're challenged in, you know, giving them the big promotion.
Anyone else want to add to particular strategies to handle someone like that? It's okay if you don't. We can go on to the next question. Okay. Should managers always try to set goals by quantity? Are there some goals where success is a cultural or qualitative shift? We're getting into the philosophical portion of our discussion now. Who wants to take this one on first? I mean, qualitative versus quantitative. What does that look like?
I'll take a stab at it just for fun. I might just share an example while others formulate ideas. But yeah, we've had a good example is the idea that not only do we want to hire at speed and fill roles and have good production and good qualitative or quantitative measurements of, you know, that's a goal, but it was last year was made pretty clear too by leadership in our organization that for hires of the nature that we're going after, the level that we're going after in particular, it's just important to hire smart and not mishire, to make sure that we've are hiring smarter and higher quality. So in order to do so, yeah, we've managed to come up with a plan in which we have additional layer of interviewer that will kind of gut check each practice, have somebody coming outside of the practice that maybe has a different lens that can see that candidate and just make sure that culturally they're going to be a good fit for the organization, that you know, again, just to make sure that we're hiring well. Yeah, and we've just added a little bit of extra measurement and I guess checking points to ensure that we have a higher quality, and put quantity a little bit to the side with the idea that if we do hire smarter, even if we hire less, in the end, our organization is going to be better off. And that's, I think, maybe a little bit of the luxury that 2020 gave us, at least at the end, that we're taking forward and hoping to start to add more of the quantitative aspect along with that quality that we found.
Someone else want to take a stab at goal setting? There you go, Pete.
Yeah, Maybe. Yeah, I think it ties a little bit to what Sarah's answer was in the previous question of as leaders being very transparent. And, when you're setting the goals, it's hard sometimes to set just a qualitative goal. I mean, the what matters, but the how also matters. So if you've got a leader that they're hitting their metrics and there's a wake of crushed souls behind them, that wasn't super effective. And many of you've probably seen those, seen those situations. And so I think that more than ever is offering some of that grace and being flexible. It's similar to the promotion goal. The promotion was kind of the quantity, that was the goal. Sometimes it's going back to being a participant in the process, and you may not control the outcome. You control how you show up and how you move through that process. So I think that can make a big difference. But again, it does take, for us as leaders, it takes being able to extend that grace and acknowledge. It doesn't mean you completely soften the standards or let the standards down, because having that challenging goal can really engage people and bring out their best thinking. And in this last year, things were chaotic and things were stressful. One of my employees shared something with me, and we had a goal that as a company, we softened the goal a little bit. We took it down to 60% instead of 100% of this metric. And the team said, hey, with all due respect, we want to still hit 100%. And they did. And the insight that the team member shared was, when things are all crazy around, having that clear goal, it takes work from being just one more thing on an already crazy life into that almost, for lack of a better word, kind of an escape to where I can just focus on the goal and I can just get after it. And I know that even for those couple hours, I'm making a difference. So I thought that was a huge eye opener for me, and one of those moments where it's like, man, I was so inspired by my team member at that point. But yeah, so that's my shot at that answer.
And a very good one indeed. Sarah, Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I also, again, agree with the points raised, but it's also made me chuckle. I'm just in a chuckling mood. I don't know. But I remember my dad often saying to me, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And so I think about that in the context of, quantitative versus qualitative goals too. It's not just what you do, it's also how you do it. So I think, Pete, to your point, I mean, if you're creating mayhem and madness in the to get to that outcome, that's not, in line with or, connected to our values as a division, as an organization. And it's also, I think, incorporating reminders around what our values are, and treating people with respect, and making sure that there's integrity in your decisions, things like that. And so I do think that it's important to highlight the values and the expectations that we have in terms of how people behave and interact with one another, in addition to that outcome or that goal that we're looking for them to achieve as well.
Numbers do have a very soothing effect, though, to Pete's point. Sometimes if you're just given that number and that you have to work towards that, you kind of don't have to think about the whys and wherefores. You just got to get to that number in times of great uncertainty. I could see why that team was really pushing for that. But to your point, Jay, I really do think that this entire year has opened up a whole set of skills that none of us really tapped into all that much before. The how you say something is really, all of those soft skills, the emotional intelligence that maybe was laying fallow for a long time, definitely had to come and play into this. But we have another question that's sort of related to this. Once goals have been set, what kind of check-ins and adjustments do you recommend over the year, especially at a time when conditions are changing so fast? Sarah, I'm going to come to you first on this, because I love the idea of this regular coaching, and I'm sure that they all have a specific timeline of check-ins that they have to do. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm. So, the way that we work with companies is every employee has access, which is, very important to my co-founder and I. We're creating a new model of equitable access where everyone at every level of every identity and background can now access what has typically only been available to the highest level executives or leaders at a company. And, what we've seen is just everything, I talk about manager or HR having to solve all the world's problems. Well, there's also been this focus on managers now for years, where like that is where all of the L&D dollars are going. And it's managers, managers, managers. But what we also know is that a lot of those managers fall short in being that coach, or they often are incredible individual contributors that are then rewarded with a team that they now get to manage. And even if they have all of the right intent, they often are not capable of inspiring or leading people in the manner in which an organization would want them to, which is where coaching really, I see it as almost like a safety net in addition. Like we expect our managers to be able to do this, and they very often are not able to do it. And then I will say that a lot of them either have their own individual contributor responsibilities, or they just don't have the bandwidth right now to be able to support people in the way that they want to. And so coaching just adds like this whole other level of accountability, where someone is now, like, they are owning their development and skill building and goal setting, and they're showing up to their meetings with their managers ready to go, holding themselves and their manager accountable to the track that they're on. And I think that that can only benefit. And we've seen, the data shows that people are retained at higher levels, they are much more productive, and they're able to communicate more effectively about their needs, right? So, going back to Kendall talking about flexibility, it's, if you go into your manager and you're all gung-ho about your goals, but you're like, listen, from 9 to 11, I can't be online every morning because I don't have childcare right now. I'm using my own example. And my partner, is an individual sales contributor and has to like get on the phone for 2 solid hours, but I'm going to crush my goals if you are able to, allow me this flexibility. Some people wouldn't even know how to have that conversation if they didn't have like their secret weapon of a coach behind them, like helping, push them along and hold them accountable.
And they're checking in with their coaches, what, like once a week or what?
Typically, we've seen a huge uptick in this. So at Bravely, people can get on the phone with a coach within a couple of hours. Most people meet their coach and then they extend that relationship over time. They keep going back to the same person. But sometimes they decide to keep, meeting with new coaches to see like where the fit is. But typically they're meeting on a regular basis, if not a biweekly or monthly basis, to stay on track.
Pete, is there a sweet spot there for check-ins to make sure people are on track to meet goals?
That's a good question. I think for us, we try to do regular one-on-ones. What regular looks like might be different by role and by team, and I think that's one of the mixes. To Sarah's point, helping managers be more coach-like, knowing that they aren't coaches, but even just be a little bit more coach-like, be a little more curious and ask those questions and engage in a dialogue versus being directive, I think super important. So we try to have that kind of a structure to the one-on-one where, the participant brings the agenda and kind of drives that agenda, and then the coach or manager in this case, operates kind of as a coach to help create that accountability. And it looked like there was another question in there kind of related to how do you hold people accountable? And it's you in that it's got to be a conversation. It can't be that directive because I think you lose a lot from that. But just create the dialogue where people can be very clear on what the expectations are. And a lot of times we found a lot of our employees are going to be harder on themselves or set more challenging objectives for themselves than we might have set for them, and get pleasantly surprised. People have really high standards for themselves, even in these crazy times. While they want some of that grace when they need it because of other things that are going on in their life, they're also willing to work late at night or Saturday mornings or while they're watching their kids do some activity or something. So there's been a lot of wins from that by just being willing to engage in that conversation and be flexible. But yeah, regular, the sweet spot. For a lot of teams, it's once a week. Some it's every other week. Just depends.
I have to believe that when people say that they're their own worst critic, particularly in a job interview, we should believe them, because if this pandemic has proven anything, is that people are driving themselves really, really hard. So somewhat related question on this, I want to know, Kendall, like how often you're all thinking that check-ins should happen, but what about annual reviews? Is that sort of, with regular check-ins, not even a thing anymore?
Yeah, the check-in iterant on average, I would say for at least my team is 2 times a week, and goals are set in real time. So really all of that assessment again happens along the stream of a week, a month, and then the quarter's done. But really the formalized review is done quarterly. We don't really get too crazy about the fact that a year's done. Now we have 4 quarters to look back on. We do have an additional check-in on your employment anniversary, which is kind of fun too, just because you get to say, hey, I've been here for 2 years or 3 years, et cetera, and ask how are you doing. That's a little bit more of a, that's a more long-standing internal driven opportunity to take a look at things like promotions and advancements, et cetera. But again, to answer your question, twice a week typically, and then the more usual check-ins are happen or assessments are done on a quarterly basis.
And Jay, what's the sweet spot for you all?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty consistent. I mean, what we really try to promote is that conversation between the manager and employee to co-create what that cadence should be and what that looks like. And then I can't remember, Pete or Sarah, if you said it, but also encouraging the employee to actually set that agenda and come, prepared to discuss, what those topics are. And so it could be weekly, depending on the nature of the type of role that they have, or it could be bi-weekly. For my team specifically, we meet bi-weekly, but we also have team meetings on a weekly basis, as well as HR huddles, we like to call them, just to do, check-ins, whether it's personal, professional. And out of that, sometimes there's an impromptu, meeting as well that would be necessary depending on, what we're focusing on. But yeah, I would agree in just setting that cadence and committing to that. We actually, prior to me joining, there were quarterly check-ins. That was a sort of a new approach for, I think, us holistically as an organization and specifically within my division. What we were finding though is that the practice, people were more focused on the practice of having to do the quarterly check-in. It felt more like a labor as opposed to like a necessary sort of step or an opportunity to, to reconnect with your employee and find out how things were going. So we have just recently evolved back to annual performance reviews. But again, we're still trying to build that muscle and that mindset around regular check-ins, just check in and see how things are going and see what support is needed and say what support is needed from an employee perspective too. So we're trying something different right now. We'll see where that goes. But again, like I said, the emphasis is on encouraging the regular communication between the employee and the manager.
And everything is always subject to change, as we've discovered. Okay, so we just have a few minutes left. I want to do a speed round on this question. What is the status of stretch goals in these times? There was always a certain amount of eye rolling over hyper ambitious goals. So is the term kind of outmoded? As I said, we just have a couple of minutes, so I'll just ask you to chime in very quickly. Pete, let's start with you.
I still think challenging goals, but if they're too challenging, I think you demotivate folks pretty quickly with that.
All right, Sarah?
I would say stretch goals are dependent on the individual. Again, like just going back, my stretch goal is going to be different from Jay's based on our circumstances right now. So make sure you're taking that into account.
Kendall?
Yeah, we sort of at least look at having draw a difference between kind of a quota and a goal. And quota is sort of what's expected, whereas a goal is reaching a little bit further. So we make that distinguishment. So if you hit quota, you can feel good about that. You hit this goal, then you can feel great about that. So we look at it in sort of a layered way.
And last but not least, Jay.
Yes, we take a similar approach to its sort of, expectations, and then so meeting expectations or exceeding expectations, and whether that's a challenging goal or we use terminology aspirational goal. It depends on the individual. So I think that'll evolve this year, as we've stated.
Along with everything else. Well, that's just about our time. I know that we could spend at least another half hour with more questions, but audience members, if you did not get your specific question answered, please feel free to reach out to the panelists or me directly on LinkedIn. We would welcome connecting with you. And I really appreciate you all being with us. Pete, Sarah, Jay, and Kendall, you've been terrific. Steve, over to you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Lydia, and thank you to our expert speakers, in particularly for responding so thoughtfully to the audience questions, whether they were practical or philosophical, qualitative or quantitative. That was a great conversation. So thanks again to our partners Bravely, and to Achievers, and to all of you who have participated today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. This Friday, January 29th, we have Women in Work, Why We Need a Marshall Plan for Moms. And next Thursday, February 4th, Employee Financial Resilience, Taking a Holistic, Outcomes-Oriented Approach. Thanks everyone for joining today. Stay well.